Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Nice to see you again.
Yes, sir. Very nice to see you too, sir. Um, Today is a very interesting day. The countdown, sir, is 2 days away to probably one of the most important events in Africa in decades. And that is the elections in Nigeria. I'm not going to ask you the obvious question. I'm sure a lot of people will want to know uh, whether we are uh, ratified, articulated, or obedient in what we do. I will not ask the question, but I will ask that given the number of days that we've got left to go to the elections, have the candidates done enough? And secondly, all the candidates have, almost all anyway, I think, have signed a peace accord. And how important is that peace accord in maintaining stability in the country over the coming days?
Um, Thank you very much for the series of questions that you have put out there. First of all, even if you discount the usual Nigerian exceptionalism, the fact that you have the last count, you have a former president of South Africa leading the observer team from the Commonwealth. You have the Commonwealth Secretary General herself here. You have Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president of Kenya. I believe he's leading the AU. And, you know, given the caliber of heads of observer teams that we have, it means the election is important, not only to Nigeria, but to South Africa, to Africa, to the world, to the Commonwealth. And I think we should take it that seriously. Number two, the candidates obviously have arranged their campaign to put their best feet forward, in the sense that the style of the campaign that they have adopted is one that puts them in the best of the light according to their own personality. But Nigeria had been the loser for that, because the rallies allowed you to say the same thing over and over and over again without going into details. In fact, you'll be wasting your time if you are addressing a crowd of 50,000 people, you start talking about foreign exchange rate, its relationship to the quantum of money that the CBN prints, and how you intend to do anything about that. Well, you'll be going over their heads. They just want the platitudes, and that's what they got. The kind of people on this platform, I'm sure, like you and I, would have preferred the kind of platform that allows each candidate to be grilled according to the details of the party ideology, the party program, how the identification of the problems facing the country, and how they intend to tackle those problems. It will have meant the kind of stage where you're not going to have more than 2 or 3 people or 3 candidates with one moderator, and that allows questions to be posed by the moderator to each of the candidates, and for them to be given sufficient time to apply their own senses to the question that they are being asked. Now, the first, who's the blame? And the first one I would say is we Nigerians. Again, our kind of, overinflated ego. Of the 18 candidates who signed the 18 candidates who signed the peace accord yesterday, believe me, I don't think I can identify more than 4 or 5 who deserve to be regarded, to be regarded as serious candidates. But each one who sits in a room of 50 people gets adopted as a candidate, sends his name to INEC, and his name goes forward. He's not even going to get 50 votes, I can assure you. And we have just 2 more days, or the results will start coming in maybe on Sunday, and we will see. And I really will, I don't know. Maybe people on our platform can pitch in, and let's have a conversation on this, because I would have said, if in the past election you had less than 100,000 votes, you really shouldn't, your party should be disqualified from taking part in the next election. But then people will say, oh, well, in 4 years, who know how many people will have come of age, and therefore the structure and base of the party could have increased, even though I doubt it. But as long as we have this kind of platform where you allow everybody who is adopted by a husband and wife party to start signing peace accords, who must take part in debate, you are not going to have a useful debate. So that's a long-winded answer to we didn't get the best that we could have got out of the campaign. Signing of the peace accord, is it going to be useful? And this is where I may shock some members of, if not all members of our platform. I believe that we Nigerians, from the president downwards, have demarketed Nigeria. I listen when I monitor the international media. It's all about violence in Nigeria, electioneering marked by violence, marked by disruption, marked by death. Well, and I'm not surprised. I'm 81 years old. Anyone who is below 60 cannot, unless he studies carefully, and journalists are not measured by, the intensity of the investigation, cannot come and tell me that we've had a violent campaign period. When you compare it with the things that happened in the 50s and in the 60s, when campaign rallies of opposition were disrupted by hired thugs And I'm not talking about one or two episodes, talking about several episodes. The amount of people who died in the elections in 59 and in 64, and if you add the regional elections, it was a humongous number. Now, I mean, since 79 in this country, up till now, I am not sure that political political violence has contributed to a lot of deaths in Nigeria. Now, not to now talk about about election-related death. I mean, if I mean, as a scholar, if I'm doing analysis, if in the past 4 years there have been repeated killings, a pattern, repeated killings targeting members of the security forces, targeting, millionaires, billionaires, targeting business partners, and what have you. Then don't tell me if that violence continues, that violence is related to elections. If a student wrote that for me, that student, I will score him or her 0, because he hasn't dealt with the theory of analytical relativity. And yet that is what the press is doing. If a mango falls on my head today now, oh, election-related violence, a mango from some tree fell on, it must have been thrown by an enemy or a political opponent, forgetting that, my compound is filled with, mango trees, and some are bound to land on my head. Since I don't monitor the way they grow and mature. So I think there's been a lot of demarketing of Nigeria. This has not been a violence-related election. I think we've done very well by ourselves. Please mark what I have said, because I don't want somebody to come back and say, oh, but in such and such a place, they attacked us. In such and such a place, they attacked us. I'm talking about the quantum of the attack and the volume of electoral activities that have taken place in Nigeria. After all, during the last election in America between Trump and Biden, Biden's motorcade was blocked off a highway in the South and almost hijacked until the Secret Service and the police and so on had to send in helicopter movement to dispel the crowd from the street. Now, nobody used that isolated incident to describe the kind of election that they've had. So, having said that, every activity that contributes to the peaceful outcome of the election should be welcomed. So let us deal with the transition from one government to another in phases to see. Everybody agrees we've had a good electoral act 2022 to operate. So we score ourselves high on that. Number 2, we've gone through the time of primaries, and no primary has been disrupted. They haven't had to throw chairs or throw, the police have not had to be invited in to throw grenades or what have you. We score ourselves high on that. Then we have had the actual campaign itself. And there have been isolated cases of violence. We should score ourselves high on that. The last one left is the actual voting on Saturday. followed by the actual counting of the ballots cast. So out of 5 major stages, we've gone through 3 where we should score assessor, and we have just 2 left. Admittedly, those 2 are the critical stages that should then lead us to wherever it is that the next government that we should get. So I mean, I'm satisfied. I'm ready to defend this electoral process anywhere at any time. But please, if there are people on our platform who disagree with me, please, let's have a conversation. I will take the questions.
Okay, sir. There's one question someone has put through to me here, which I think is a very key question. The hopes of Nigerians has gone really high in this election. The participation on social media, the consciousness in people's minds has just skyrocketed compared to previous elections. Everybody is talking about it this time around. But then we had that date that still sticks in a lot of minds, and that's June 12th. And the question someone is asking here is, whose responsibility is it going to be to ensure that we do not have a June 23, effectively a repeat of what we had then, where the elections get canceled for whatever reason or nullified for whatever reason? So that's the first question. There is another question I've seen, but if you take that one first, sir, and then I'll come back with the next one.
Thank you. Yes, I always like, comparative analysis. There was a time I was very worried that we may be, we may be drifting towards a replication of June 12th. And that was when there were all these talk, not by government, but by non-state actors, talking about postponement of the election, interim national government, and one contraption or the other. It got so loud, it really, really worried me. And at every stage, both the president and my colleague, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, kept saying this election will take place. So I then scratch my head. Why the cynicism? Why the unpreparedness to accept the assurances of government? By yesterday, I had come to the conclusion that it was a strategy adopted by non-government actors to preempt government from doing those things that they didn't want government not to do. That it wasn't that they had evidence that government was going to do them, was going to impose interim national government, was going to postpone election. Not that there was ever any credible evidence, but having been beaten once, one is now twice shy. You stumble over a stone once, you keep your eyes on the ground in the hope that there is no stone that has been deliberately planted or that one's eyes, have grown rather dim. So if it was a strategy, then it was a good strategy. It worked. No interim national government, no postponement of the election. Now, the question now says, what guarantee do we have that there will be no cancellation? Yeah, there will be no cancellation of the election results, which was what happened with June 12th. And I could only say that I will go on 3 things. One, the repeated declaration by the president himself, not only to Nigerians, but to the world. The declaration by the chairman of INEC that he will produce a fair, free, transparent, credible election, and the presence of these high caliber observer teams in town, all these three, I think I will regard them as checkmates of any plan to derail the last stage of the election. However, there is an issue we face, which is not in the government's hand. It is in the hand of we Nigerians. As a theoretical proposition, how do we handle a situation where, due to the activities of IPOB, elections are not held in the Southeast? People are afraid to come out. People stay at home. What will be the impact of that boycott on the credibility of the election results? I have no answer to that, except to say, well, we may they have to accept results where the elections have been held, and then a week later or 2 weeks later, now have an election in the Southeast where there have been boycotts. And this time, the Southeast flooded by almost the entire Nigerian army, Nigerian police, other Nigerian security personnel, such that, you know, if you go out to vote, you are assured of your security. That's one way out. But let us hope that we don't get to that stage. Given the fact that we have 4 critical personalities on this stage, and it turns out that by Sunday night, it's obvious that nobody is going to meet the constitutional provisions of a majority of the votes cast and 25% in is it 2/3 of the states. If that is that constitutional provision, that bar is not met, then we will have to have a runoff between the two who will qualify. But once you start getting to that stage, things start getting very, very tricky. And even though there are constitutional provisions to address those issues, I will start to get a bit worried. I hope we don't get that far. I hope that by Sunday night, we have a clear winner and we move on.
Someone is asking a question here, sir, regarding the peace accord, that even though the candidates themselves have signed a peace accord, are the candidates able to control the people who are rooting for them? And of what use would be a peace accord if the candidates are not able to control the people who are pushing for them to their followers?
Well, I can only talk from experience. I mean, my father was a politician, ran on the platform of one of the political parties in the 50s, won the election, into the Independence House of Rep in Lagos. Now, meetings are held between the candidate, organizing secretary, zonal secretaries, village secretaries, ward coordinators, constantly. And that's why the message gets passed down. No violence, no disruption. Tell our people to play according to the Queen's rules. I myself, had an attempt on the platform of the SDP during the Babangida transition. And this was again the format that I, as the candidate, with my principal officers, met with, had meetings, strategic meetings, where the message gets passed from the top down. And in these days, and at that time, we didn't have the GSM. In these days of the GSM, we're so easy to organize a Zoom meeting within 24 hours. It's easy to get that message all the way down and across to your organizers. Now, of course, why do you have red cards if people don't break the law? Why do you have courts and judges? That you always have, somebody who gets drunk, when it's supposed to be monitoring and moderating the activities of this or that, or somebody who gets so overexcited and just what is not supposed to do. But by and large, I have no doubt in my mind that if a candidate decides to obey the parameters of the peace accord, the message will get all the way down to the grassroots. But if he doesn't, he thinks he's going to lose, and the only way he could rescue his reputation is to create trouble and then claim that it is the trouble that led to his bad performance. That will take place. And I hope that, the flashpoints that have been identified by the security forces have already seen a deployment of the military, the police, security forces. But as we've said so many times in this program, we don't have enough security forces, enough security personnel actually to maintain. If Nigerians decide to misbehave, we can only count on the good sense of most of us, plus then the inadequate security personnel to guarantee a violence-free election.
So going by, there's a question here, but I will try to word it appropriately. Going by the results of the campaigns and seeing the turnout in some of the events, it seems obvious that it's likely to be a close call between the candidates. And this person wants to know that if there were to be a shock result at the end of these elections, do you think the candidates who have lost will accept defeat gracefully? And I would not say what the shock result might be, because it could be any of them. But assuming there was a shock result at the election, would the losing candidates accept gracefully, sir?
I am sure the shock candidate is already well known on the streets of Jerusalem and Ashkelon. Now, would the others accept? It's not in the character of Nigerian politicians to gracefully accept election defeats, which is why the behavior of President Ebele Jonathan was so much out of character. And having done so, we hope that the present candidate would adopt that graciousness. I'm not too convinced, I'm not too persuaded myself, given the number of cases that we've had in courts and that we still have in courts dealing with pre-election material. And I'm hoping that, and we try to do this, by the way, in the thruMYeyes electoral panel report, that where there's a frivolous case, and most of these cases end up being frivolous, where there is a frivolous case brought by a candidate, and that candidate loses, the case amounts to a waste of the time of the court. That particular candidate should be disqualified from running in the next 2 elections. I think that will curb the rascality of some of our politicians. We also have such a provision recommended in the post-election activities, again, where cases go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court itself finds that on the basis of merit, this is a case that should never have been filed. I think the next electoral act should include provisions that allows the court to ban those responsible for frivolous election petitions from contesting. But I cannot give any guarantee that it won't be in the character of the Nigerian to accept things gracefully. A village chieftaincy title, you contest, you lose, and you know you've lost. But we have this cultural trait. I will say it in Yoruba and then try and do a translation of English. And if my translation is not too acceptable, maybe somebody else will help me. The Yoruba say, "Kakake kuma jesisi afishawadanu." In other words, the rat comes to where there are things which he won't eat. But instead of passing it by, he would rather scatter it so that nobody eats it, even though it's not part of his own menu. And that is what we tend to have. You want to now ensure that for the next 30 years, until the case gets to the Supreme Court, the man who won the chieftaincy title will not enjoy being there for 30 years. By the time the Supreme Court rules that this is the legitimate owner of that title, the man probably has about 10, 15 more years to live. And that is what we do. We know we are not the one who owns this land, whether it is just one plot of land. We go all the way to the Supreme Court to deny, and the courts kept issuing all these injunctions, maintain status quo ante bellum. Again, I hope that maybe it's going to take an act of parliament or National Assembly to cure our judiciary of this embracement of interim injunctions. Go around your town. Go around your town and see how many abandoned buildings are there. Result of court granting injunctions. Once a week, I drive past the local Murtala Mohammed airport. And to my left, if you are heading towards the presidential lounge, you will see this huge abandoned buildings. Not one building, buildings, because they are linked by several walkways and so on. Abandoned because there's a court injunction against continuing that, whatever it is. I'm sure that even some of the judges who have handled that case have probably retired now. Why not adopt an alternative procedure where you say, right, go ahead with that building, whoever is in possession of the plot. But if whoever loses this case must pay in full to the winner, the whole amount that has been spent illegally. Why not do that? But why go to Lagos Ibadan Expressway suffered from that, where again the judge issued the injunction, you can't go ahead, and so it was abandoned. And yet we blame governments for abandoned buildings, abandoned projects, and so on, when the judiciary itself can assist in tackling this issue.
There are two questions that I will put before I move to this. I want to ask you about the AU summit. There's some questions on the AU summit, but two questions I would ask here, sir. The first person is saying, this is from YouTube, are the candidates doing enough to encourage people to come out to vote? Because people believe assurances from people who talk like them. And my question to you, sir, from that comment, do people really vote because someone talks like them or someone looks like them? And have the candidates done enough to get their supporters to come out and vote?
Now, if I understand the question, the questioner wants to know whether ethnic identity still colors our behavioral pattern. And the answer will have to be yes. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves, even if we are not honest with other people. Ethnic identity still colors our electoral behavior. And each of the political parties, each of the candidates has, of course, played on that. I don't want to give illustrations or give examples because I don't want to particularize behavior, but just let me say that it's not, you see, go back to 1959 election in Nigeria. The four major parties, the NPC was identified with the North. The Action Group was identified with the West. The NCNC was identified with the East. And NEPU was identified with what I'll call Kano Talakawa politics. Now, you will have expected that basically labor unions would actually identify with NEPU. But no, NEPU ended up being bottled as a Kano political party where its base is localized in Kano. And as I said, all the other political parties now had their own ethnic bases. Run across to this year, the political parties, again, the four political parties that we have now, again, have been I would say, I've developed ethnic coloration. The Emilokon Party has been identified as a Southwest party. The Obedient have been identified as a Southeast party. Never mind what people say about it. It's the party of the youth. We will see the voting pattern in 2 days' time. The Kwankwaso party is like a replication of NEPU, of the Amino Kano party. And the Atiku party has now again been identified as a Northwest party. Has anything then really changed? From 1959 up to now, has anything really changed? And this was what motivated Babangida into saying we will have only 2 political parties, and each Nigerian should find a home in either of the 2 parties. But of course, we claim that that was a violation of our right to identify with a party of our choice. And so we've ended up this year now with 18 political parties who are putting up candidates. And yet we know deep in our hearts that we'll probably only have 4 major strategic political parties on the plate. So has anything then changed in Nigerian politics, apart from what I said earlier, that it has become less violent prone? And the answer, at least based on this ethnic identity basis, will be nothing seems to have changed from 1959 up till now. And so I hope we will still go back to IBB's 2-party basis.
The last one, sir. This person says, could you say there was a linkage between the Naira redesign policy and vote buying, or everything was an attempt to fly a cynical kite on Nigerians?
Well, that case is in court, is it not? And I'm one of those who I fear those judges so much that I wouldn't want to be held guilty of contempt of court, especially since the court itself, the Supreme Court, seems to have reacted very, very sharply against comments made by this case that is before them. So let me not put myself in danger of being dragged before the Supreme Court for contempt of court.
All right, sir. Let me go to the African Union. The summit has just concluded, and one of the points that stuck out for me was this issue of Israel being an observer, and the fact that their AU has then gone on to say Israel will remain suspended as an observer. And 2 questions come out of that for me. Number one, what is the significance of Israel as an observer in the AU? Why the choice of Israel? Could that have been any other country? And number 2, do you agree with the stance of the AU on continuing the suspension of Israel as an observer?
Recall that on this platform, I have several times raised the issue, and let me now make it a proposal, please. Can we have a town hall I know it's difficult to arrange a Zoom for something like this. The last time we tried it, it didn't really quite come out. But could we have a town hall format meeting of maybe 5 of us or 6 of us on the definition of Africa? The definition of Africa. And to that extent, what constitutes African unity? Who are the people who will qualify for membership and who will not qualify for membership? Is it going to be based on geography, or is it going to be based on ideology? We've always had the Palestinians, the Palestinian government have always had observer status in the African Union or the OEU, as it was at that time. And well, you might say, well, it's because we perceived what was going on in Palestine as a colonial issue. Fine. But then it's not, I mean, every country, whether it was in Asia or South America, or even in the West Indies, that we accepted as observers to the OAU and now the AU. So in accepting the Palestinians, we were making a statement. That situation is still not over. I don't think that the OAU or the AU had ever claimed to be an honest interlocutor in the crisis in the Middle East. No, we adopted the Palestinians as our co-travelers. They supported us in South Africa during the anti-colonial struggle, the anti-apartheid struggle down there, even though the Arabs did not support us in terms of supply of oil or what have you. So the issue of Israel as of being granted observer status was bound to be problematic for the AU. And I think it was an act of executive recklessness on the part of the chairman of the commission, who was, and I think is still from Chad, to have single-handedly granted observer status to Israel. It should have been a collective decision of the heads of states, the presidents and the heads of states. Even at the United Nations level, it is not the Secretary General who takes the decision whether to grant observer status to, an organization or not to grant observer status. It becomes a collective decision. And I suspect quite, it's even more than rascality. It's a time bomb that was being planted. The issue of, the issue of Israel was a time bomb that was bound to disrupt and continue to disrupt decision-making within. And I think the best thing is really for the African Union to override that the action of his chairman was null and void, especially since we've had approaches from the Africans in the diaspora who make up the population in the West Indies, asking to be granted, I'm not sure whether it's observer status or some other kind of status, and they haven't been granted yet. So while, and I would have thought that on the basis of is it racial propinquity, that the Africans in the diaspora have a better case than Israel. So it has to do with the membership of the AU itself. And as I said, I offer this platform for us to have, if the moderator can arrange it, 2-3 weeks down the line, for us to have, and our members who are interested in taking part in that town hall something should please get in touch with our moderator so we really can debate this. It is a major issue. There is no easy solution to it because it also involves, the president, or is it the Secretary General of the Arab League, addressed the AU summit, where people could claim so we already then accept that the Arabs have a league of their own. Therefore, as I said, the Africans in the diaspora in the West Indies should also qualify to have observer status with us. There are several issues involved there.
So I think that I'll take on the town hall challenge. It's a lot easier to organize such programs now. And tentatively, we will look at maybe the second or third week in March to try to put that in. I'm sure I can get the team to work around that and make that happen. And for anyone, please do get in touch with me. You can send me a note direct if you want to be part of that. Let me know, and I will pick that up. But we'll convert probably second or third week of March as a town hall session on that particular topic, sir. That's very, very easy to do now. Before we run out of time, and I may take you a little bit over time tonight, bear with me, sir. President Biden turned up in Ukraine this week, and some have said perhaps it was reckless to go into a war zone the way he did, where a lot of his senior officials were not aware that he was turning up there. And then Russia has also somewhat responded by refusing to continue to be part of that nuclear arms treaty with Washington. What is your take on the visit by President Biden and that announcement by Russia on their participation in the nuclear arms treaty? Should we be worried about Russia's stance on that treaty?
First, the unprecedented visit by President Biden to Ukraine, to Kiev. Since the United States have become involved in wars all over the world, it has become standard practice for a sitting American president to assert his courage or to assert a certain responsibility for putting troops there to visit Iraq, Afghanistan, Um, you know, maybe Obama did it, Bush, and now President Biden feels he's got to match up to the precedent set by former presidents of the United States. Except this one was rather different. In the case of Afghanistan, Iraq, what have you, America had boots on the ground. They controlled the air, the sea, and the land forces. So a fly couldn't come near Air Force One without that fly being blown apart by missiles and what have you. In this case, America did not have any control of on the ground, in the air, or anywhere else. So what did they do? They informed the Kremlin that he was going in there and that nothing must happen to him. Some of the Russians have made a play of this, that he got his visa actually from Moscow and not from Kiev, that it was with the permission of Putin that he went there. Others have been in Moscow actually critical of Putin giving him the go ahead. Now, I think that there was no way he was going to go into Kiev without Moscow knowing about it, whether he informs them or not. So really, the information to me was not really an act of permission. It was to ensure that state actors on the part of Russia did not accidentally, not deliberately, did not accidentally carry out military activities in Kiev around that time. So what they wanted was for Russia to instruct its own people, no military action during this period. The people that actually the Americans were worried about were the non-state actors, the Wagner Group, and also the what I will call the loose elements in those republics that Russia had annexed through dubious referendum. I think those were the people that the Americans wanted to keep an eye on. If there are no state activities by Russia, it was then so easy to cage the non-state actors. And I think that's why Russia was informed. But nevertheless, for 10 hours, no phone connection. It meant Kamala Harris was actually in charge in case anything happened anywhere in the world that needed a reaction by the United States. Because for that 10 hours, Biden was incommunicado for security reasons. I suppose sooner or later, the international media will get around to discussing that factor, because I don't think it has been discussed, in full and in detail, the consequences of that kind of thing. Russia getting out or suspending its participation in START, the Strategic Arms, strategic arms reduction talks was not actually a direct reaction to Biden's mission to Kiev. It was a direct reaction to the war itself and the support and the participation by NATO in that war. I think the Russians now have come to the conclusion that the participation by NATO and by the European Union had gotten that close to the red line that Russia now needs also to react. And the reaction is going to be graded, graduated. I don't think this is going to be the last we will hear of Russian reaction to what is going on in Ukraine. Even though you didn't ask this, let me pull in this factor that I'm looking forward to tomorrow when Beijing unveils its peace plan. This is what we've been calling on in this program, a peace plan by some credible interlocutors. But let me quickly say, we will discuss this in full, hopefully next week, that Beijing has now come close to becoming a participant on the side of Russia, that it will hardly now be regarded as an honest interlocutor in this thing between Russia and Ukraine. But we will look out for the details.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I apologize for taking you 5 minutes over time, but I wanted to hear your views on the African Union and this treaty. We will be back same time next week, by which time we will know, hopefully, who the next president of Nigeria would be. And it would be interesting to then hear your views on what that means for the future of Nigeria, given the new candidates or the outcome of the elections, hoping that those elections would go on as planned. Thank you very much.
And by which time our moderator will be now a few days older than 50 years old. His birthday is coming this weekend. I'm sure we all wish you a happy birthday.
Sir, you have revealed a very important secret there. I was still going to claim 35 or something like that. But, thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated. And to our viewers, thank you very much for being here today, YouTube, Zoom. Thank you. And I will hold that town hall in March, sir. We will discuss what does African unity means. Thank you. Good night to everyone. Thank you for joining. And see you next week.